Hello everyone, in this video we're going to do another LeetCode problem. So this one is problem 1431 and it's called Kids with the Greatest Number of Candies. So the idea behind this problem is we have a group of kids and they all have a certain amount of candies or sweets or whatever you want to think of it as, and then we've got this extra bundle of sweets or candy that we want to find out if we distribute them to each kid, can that kid have the largest number of sweets or candies? And one important note here is the greatest number of candies can go to multiple kids. So for example, there could be 2 kids that have 5, and if the rest of the kids have less than 5, then there's 2 kids that have the greatest number of candies. So this is represented as an array like this, so we can see that the first kid has 2 pieces of candy, the second kid has 3 pieces of candy, the third kid has 5 pieces, 1 piece and 3 pieces. And then the extra candy that we can add, when in this case is 3, so if we add 3 to 2 we get 5, so we go and look to see if 5 is greater than or equal to, because remember there can be multiple kids with the greatest number of candies, and if 5 is greater or equal to the rest of the array, and we can see by looking at this, it is. This would be the same for 3, this would also be the same for 5. Now if we added 3 to this guy here, he would still only have 4 pieces of candy, so he would not actually have a greater amount than the rest of them, and the last kid here would also have the greatest number if he got the extra 3 pieces of candy. So what we want to do is we want to represent this in an array, so we want to say true, 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 false and true. False here because 3 plus 1 is 4, so it wouldn't meet our condition. So let's get right into it. So to start off with, we're going to want something to return. So this array that we're using here, this is going to need to be returned from our function that we're using here. So we can define this by just getting our variable. We'll say let, and we'll call it results. And we're going to just set that to an empty array for the minute because we haven't added anything to it. We have the loop through our candies, and then we can make a decision on that. And we probably also want to have a variable that's going to store the highest amount. So in this example we can see that 5 is the highest amount, so if we have a variable that stores the highest amount, or the kid that has the highest amount of candy, then we can compare this to all the other kids. So we can say this by saying let highest, and this will represent the largest number of candies, or the person with the largest amount of candy. So the next thing we want to do is we want to loop through candy, because we want to go and find out what the highest amount is. So we can do this by saying candies, and we can go and use a for each method on that, because the candies that's being passed in is an array. We can see that over here. So now we want to go and pass in our arrow function. So we'll just call C. C will represent candy in this case, so C will represent 2 or 3 or 5 or 1 or whatever that value is, and we're going to use the arrow syntax. Whoops. So now we can use our curly brackets, and within our curly brackets we can then use a conditional statement. So we want to check something, so we'll say if. So we want to check to see if this C here, if this number, so when we iterate through it the first time it'll be 2, so we want to see if 2 is greater than the highest. And we made a small little mistake here. This is not going to be an empty array, this is going to be set to 0 initially, because we want to go and replace this highest value here. So we want to see if C is greater than the highest value or variable, which is this. So if it is, we want to go and replace the highest variable with whatever C is. So we'd set this variable highest to C. So that would allow us to get the highest value after we've looped through all the elements in this array. Now the next thing we want to do is we want to go and loop through candies again. So we could use candies.forEach, and we're going to take in another arrow function. So again, we can call this C, and we can use our arrow function. So this time we want to go and check to see if the candy, which will be 2, 3, 5, 1 or 3, we want to check to see if this number plus our extra candies would allow us to have a value that's equal to our highest here or is greater. Because if it's equal or greater, that means that this first kid would have the highest amount, and this second kid would have the highest amount, and this second last kid here would not. So we would want to push false onto our results array in that case. So we're going to start off by putting our curly brackets in place and using our if condition, and now we want to go and check to see if C, which is the value that's been passed in, plus the extra candies, so plus this variable here that we're getting as a parameter, so we'll say C plus extra candies, and we want to see if that is greater than or equal to this value here, our highest. So we can put that in here, and if it is, so if this statement is true, that means that this kid would have the highest amount of candies. So we want to go and do something to our results at this stage. So we want to go and say results dot push, because we want to add to this array. We want to go and add the boolean true, because that's what we can see in our output array here. So we're going to add true. Now if this is not true, so if it's false, we want to go and do something else. So we want to go and get our results, and we don't want to push through, but we want to push the boolean false, and that should give us our array or our output as expected. So if we go and run this code, hopefully it'll pass, and we're getting an undefined here because we've actually added to our results array, but we've never actually returned it. So it would be a good idea to return that. So I'm just going to copy that. So at the end here, after our for each statements, we want to return results. So now if I go and run this again, this should work. So yeah, we get our output and our expected array to be the same. And if we go and just submit this to see does it pass the other test cases for this program, and we can see that it does. We can see that it is faster than almost any of the other solutions, but it takes up a little bit more memory, and that's intentional because we usually want our programs to be faster rather than saving an extra bit of space. We can go and buy an extra bit of space, but from a speed perspective, it's usually more beneficial. So if you did want to go and not have it as fast but save more memory, you could do this all within the one for each statement. So you could go and loop through this C once and then be adding to the highest and then checking it, but that's really messy and it would lead to much greater complexity. So you'd be having a for loop within inside a for loop, which would be n squared as far as complexity is concerned, while this here you're just doing two n operations. You're looping through the array twice, so it's actually 2n, and then when you round it up, or in this case you're rounding down, you round it to n, so the complexity is just big O of n. Hope you found the video useful. If you do, like and subscribe, and have a good day.